everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Healing Home. I'm your host, Michelle. Today we are here for episode 36 on the full moon in Aquarius, which is awesome. And I think that it's pretty appropriate that my guest is here with me on a full moon because I have Emily Ridout today, and she is a specialist in AstroYoga. And this is very intriguing work to me. And I had the pleasure of spending some time with Emily on the Interverse podcast for our last Astro Herb session with Chance and Kyle of Tippecanoe and my man Mario. And Emily was there as a special guest. And so I got to know her a little bit more. And I really was excited to bring her onto the show because she has a lot to offer. I've also seen her speak on Interverse before about what she does. And I love where she's at with everything because she's an astrologer and she's a yogi, but she blends the two in such a beautiful way. And she's able to help people get down to the root of things in their lives so that they can, transform, change, transmute things and bring it all together in a way that is really awesome, because I find yoga to be a fabulous practice. And I also find astrology to be pretty fabulous and spot on. So when you bring them together, it's pretty awesome. So before I bring Emily in, I want to thank all my patrons because you guys are awesome and you're bringing the love and support, and it means so much to me and Mario as well. So as always, thank you guys. Shout out to you guys. And it's the full moon offering today, so everyone was able to get that and know what's coming down the pipeline, but we'll talk more about that after our interview. So without further ado, help me in welcoming Emily to the stream. Hey, Emily, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. How are you, Michelle?
Doing great. Thanks for being here. How's your day going?
It's good. Yeah, I'm super stoked to be here with you, and what a lovely introduction. I love the words you used about transmutation and transformation because it is really so key in all of this work we're all doing, right? Whether it's herbalism or astro yoga or astrology or just yoga, they're all getting at the same game.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I feel the more and more I transmute and change, transform, and go through life in general, I feel like that is like our main purpose here is to transmute these energies, to integrate them, and then to ultimately change. Because it's one thing to do something and integrate and continue to integrate, but if you're not able to make those changes, I think that that's where there's like a disconnect sometimes. But I can see where that's how your work is very valuable, because something like yoga, when you add like a physical aspect to the astrology, to me it makes so much sense that it would help the transformation and then bring on more change. So like there's going to be maybe emotional changes and stuff, but then physical, because with yoga, anyone who's done yoga, who's done it for a period of time and have devoted themselves to it, know that your body changes while you're doing it, and it changes in all sorts of ways. And so I'm really excited to get into it with you and learn more about you and how you got started and everything else.
Well, I'm right there with you with the acknowledging that things are always changing, and that every change on the ethereal plane or on the emotional plane or the psychosomatic plane, of course, somatics always have to do with the body, all have to do with something in the body. Now, this doesn't mean you'll start yoga and then you'll look like a totally different person with a totally different, physique or skin sort of composition or whatever it is, right? You won't look like a different person, but you'll look like more of yourself. And really the physical changes we look at usually are on the internal plane. So I go into work like even to the level of like blood chemistry and stuff like that, which you're an herbalism person, so I'm sure you're getting in the nitty-gritty details of your own things. But it is true that so much that shifts for us externally, even if it's something like getting a new job, will have effects on our physiology.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's way more changes and shifts in that part of our body than a lot of people acknowledge, and that we can even sometimes miss at the time. You're not realizing it because you're so caught up in something. And then you have that moment to pause. And then the body changes, or the body sends you a message of, wait a second, I held out for you that whole time where you were jazzing and driving around and getting all busy and stuff, so that then when you were done with it, we could figure out what was actually going on underneath the surface or something like that. That's just been my experience. And I think that our bodies are so beautiful in that way and strong that they can hold out for a certain amount of time. And then they're like, okay, wait a second. Now, while I held out for you, you have to hold out for me while I catch up, So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's like this interesting balance that happens. And so before we get further into it, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are, and then tell them a little bit about what is AstroYoga, in your opinion, and what you've come to find out over the years.
Sure, I'd love to. So my name is Emily Ridout. I am an AstroYoga specialist. For those of you who don't know what AstroYoga is, it's astrology plus yoga together. So the practices of yoga used intelligently along with the astrology of the present moment. And also, if you're working with an individual, their personal charts. So you have a natal chart. And then if you go really deep, you have astrocartography, progressions, transits. You don't have to worry about all that right now. But basically, I take people from just the very basic understanding of astrology, and I move them into the understanding of how it works with their physical and energetic vessel. And this has been around for millennia. So a lot of what I do is I help people apply this sort of ancient wisdom into the modern context. So, we live in the world we live in, and not everybody lives in like an ashram all by themselves, meditating on the hilltop in total peace. In fact, most of us don't. We have what's known as a householder practice. So I help people figure out what to do for their lives. And I help people understand that it is an applied practice. So everything going on in astrology, sometimes people confuse it with an idea of predestination, which of course is an interesting philosophical topic, but astrology is something you actually work with. So you will have higher or lower vibratory ways of expressing your chart. And that's a lot of what we're trying to do is when people have let's say a challenge or a desire in life, I want a happy, healthy family dynamic, relationship, career, whatever it is, your dream, your spiritual dreams, your practical dreams, whatever they may be, they're written into your chart. And so a lot of people, when you have a tangible problem, you're like, well, maybe I like this, maybe I wanted this in the past, but now I want more, right? That's the nature of being a human being. And so I help people work with the desires they have, transmute old desires that have been fulfilled or have been released because they no longer desire them, and move into the space where, yes, you're getting what you want, but it's not through going after it necessarily in the same way, but through coming into alignment, so that the physical vessel, the energetic vessel, you yourself are the person who can be operative with these things that your soul has informed you, is your path.
That's lovely. That's great. You're so well spoken to. I just have to tell you, every time I've heard you talk on Interverse or elsewhere, and when we were doing Vibrant, and then just right now, I'm reminded all the time just how well spoken you are. So just a little segue to give you some shout out on that level.
That's so kind of you.
Yeah, you really are. And even on all your posts, your Instagram and everything else, I'm like, damn, she's got it nice and tight. And you just say things very calculated, and it's really nice. So anyway, just had to say that because you explained it very well. Because when somebody hears AstroYoga for the first time, they might be like, wait, what? What does that mean? So that's a great explanation. I love how you bring up the word alignment, because I love this weave that there's obviously the alignment in the stars, the alignment on your charts, the, all the connections, the squares, the trines, the this and the that. And then you have the importance of alignment in yoga. And that is like, seriously, as you know, you're a yogi, you're an instructor. The alignment is so crucial. Just like if you're ever working out or you're starting to lift weights or something, anyone who's done that, if you're doing it correctly, you have to pay attention to your movements very closely. And so, yeah, let's talk about alignment a little bit. How do you find that in your practice, and what does that mean to you when we bring up that word?
So I have a background in a couple different schools of yoga. So I've done yoga teacher trainings with various groups, some more intense. I did like a sort of more intense one in India. And then I had another also intense one in the United States. Very different schools of thought, intense in different ways. Meditation intense versus physical asana intense. And they sort of weave in. And so I have come to an understanding of an alignment, both through sort of traditional schools of thought, which are, and I'll just talk about yoga asana right now, the biomechanical principles of alignment. This is what alignment looks like. It has to look like this for the bones to be in the proper shape and the muscles to be engaged the right way, right? So there's that understanding of alignment. But I love when I'm teaching another understanding. So when I'm teaching a rigorous physical class, I will help people once they've reached a certain level so they can, stand in alignment. I'll help them train out of alignment. So because when you're walking down the street, right, an important thing that physical yoga helps you do is have the necessary skills where, like, if you slipped on ice, you could stand back up, right? Just these simple things of like, okay, there would be a new way to stand up. There would be the ability to do it. And so one of the main things I'll do physically is help people train slightly out of alignment or when things aren't perfect. Now we do it thoughtfully, so we're not just injuring people left and right. But we are thinking, okay, well, your foot might not be exactly like this. Your hip might not be exactly like this. You might need to catch yourself with your glute med and min rather than, these other things. And so with astrology, I think it's the same thing. Sometimes in modern pop cultural, I'm going to say like spiritual circles. So like the Instagram spirituality, I know we're all on Instagram. It's great. But we have this sort of idea that your highly aligned vibration will attract your perfect life. And it's almost like a flaw of modern spirituality that we have this sort of seductive line of thinking. But I would suggest that it's when you are training, when you're training yourself, so to speak, into life, which all of life is sort of a training program on this path, right? You're actually sometimes going slightly out of alignment. And so this idea that we have to be perfectly in alignment is off, but the idea that we want to be able to get back into alignment is a key. And the capacity to recognize what alignment is and what alignment isn't is a huge key. So before you align people, really, you have to talk to them about what alignment is. And you can see that in their astrology chart, and you can see what the higher vibration of it or the lower vibration would be. Some people do have very powerful charts, but everybody has the capacity to really work with their placements to enter into a space where even something that in the past frustrated you about yourself. So people who are like, I don't know, my temper or my emotionality or my, the way I sort of communicate or whatever it may be, or you feel unlucky in a certain way, in a certain aspect of your life, which many people have like a little disgruntled piece of themselves. You can look at that and say, okay, well, what does this piece of you actually need to be in alignment? And very often it's those pieces that we'll try to push away just subconsciously. We don't even realize we're doing it. We're like, I don't like that, so I'm pushing it to the side. Those pieces with astrology and with the practice of AstroYoga, we integrate back in and turn it really into a strength for that person. sometimes even their most potent strength, because then it's integrated and a huge amount of power is unleashed.
Yeah, that makes sense so much because, yeah, I mean, I love the thought of practicing out of alignment or just allowing the non alignment to be what it is instead of being very like, hey, you're out of alignment, like, and then you get in trouble or something, and almost welcoming it instead of looking at it like a negative thing. I really like that because that's how I've seen astrology as well, or just in life in general. When there's something that's like super challenging, or it's something that you don't want to do, or takes extra juice for you to get there, it's usually the stuff that you should be doing, that you're meant to do, or that once you do it and you get over that hump, you're going to get even a greater reward because you had to like push through whatever that challenge of it was to just get to the point.
It's true. And in a certain way, so everybody alive right now can have a great life. Okay. You're all welcome to a great life. We each get the capacity for joy. And everybody alive right now chose to incarnate in this time where we're undergoing a lot of change and shifts. So people, we often speak about transmutation of our karmic past, or our past selves, or our past lives, or even our soul family karma. But what a lot of people are actually doing in this lifetime is helping to transmute collective energy and to transmute the challenges we've all faced and the histories of really all of humanity, the joys, the struggles, the past, the way things once were. And we are opening an operational system, so to speak, into the future. And so challenge will be no stranger, I think, to people alive in this moment. Even those who appear to be living the life of luxury are still involved in this process.
Yeah, totally. And that's always a really great thing to keep in mind too, because anyone can do it, but you can forget when something looks so perfect, or it's like, oh wow, how do they just do it all? And it's like they must just have nothing that goes wrong, or seemingly. And it's like, no, we all do. And it's like part of it's part of being human, or whatever, it's just part of the design, in my opinion. So I like that. And I like just the thought of working with these things on a collective level, because I look at that as the same kind of aspects of like ancestral stuff, because we're all also working with our ancestors. And so you can look at the collective, but it's like we're doing that even on a more smaller scale with our own ancestry, of you're choosing to maybe the buck stops here on whatever bad habit that is in your family line. You choose to close that door, or at least start to work to close the door, or to be more conscious about the fact that, well, this runs in the family and it's detrimental, and I've had my challenges with it. So maybe I should be the one to step up and maybe, sort of cool that down a little bit. And I think that we can be doing that on so many levels. And we even do it with our friendships and our partners, romantic and not romantic. You can help each other in that way. And that's like one of the more beautiful things. That's why too, astrology and yoga as two subjects, they've both been very helpful to me in my life. And so that's why I think the blending of the two is so important. So I wanted to ask you, what came first, yoga or astrology?
Historically, or
like in your life, like what did you, yeah, I guess historically, were you like drawn to astrology first, or was it yoga?
Oh, just personally for me.
Yeah, not like the history of.
I was like, the ancient Babylon. No.
Yeah, no. For you, Miss Emily, what came first?
I was like, well, that's a complicated question.
That's a big question.
Okay. For me, it was yoga coming first. So in my first yoga teacher training, 14 years ago, I was introduced to the concept of astrology and yoga connected. And at the time, I was like, what? Because I was learning a lot of things that were new and different for me at the time. And so I wound up learning Jyotish which is one of the forms of astrology in India, doing a bunch of people's charts, and starting to do their medical astrology, really, and asking questions of the people, the kind-hearted people who gave me their birth data back then. I was so impressed with it that later I wrote all my grad school entrance essays to get in to study that. I wound up doing a master's degree and opening a professional practice later on after, much more study, studying with wonderful teachers and whatnot, and wound up with AstroYoga, to my surprise, as my career path.
Wow, that's cool. How much time did you spend in India?
Oh, just maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
I wasn't there for yoga. I worked at a music conservatory there.
Oh, sweet. That's cool. So yoga kind of found you then, in a way.
Yeah. Well, I had already practiced yoga and done my teacher so I was in it. So I had a deep love of yoga that I think stemmed from a love of somatic movement, embodiment practices that I had done since a young age. And I was realizing I'm in my 20s as a yogi. I've been an over 20-year practice at this point, and if anybody's on the fence about starting yoga, I would just say, just do it. And if you're on the fence about astrology, looking at your chart, I'd say just do it. Give it a try. See what you find out.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on both, specifically the yoga, because by no means, I'm not an astrologer or what have you. I dabble and I understand things on certain levels. But with the yoga, I've found it to be one of the most healing practices I've come across. And I started it in a time in my life that was very rocky and very emotional and very, I was doing massive amounts of shadow work. And one of the only things that I could think to do was yoga. And I had never even really done it before. I'd known about yoga, I'd seen it and this and that. And I just started doing it at home. And then I went and took classes outside of the home and stuff. And it was probably one of the only things that kept me feeling balanced at that time and helped me tap into emotions and thoughts in a deeper way. And that's one of the things that I've found it to be so valuable for is being able to tap more deeply into emotions that are stuck or emotions that are locked up in our muscles or in our mostly muscles, but to be in a position and you're holding it and you're just like, all of a sudden something comes up. I mean, it's pretty profound. And so for you on a personal level, if you don't mind talking about it, has there been a time in your life that yoga was a thing that helped you get through something or helped you to just feel like, okay, at least I have this right now that I know will ground me and help me to just feel a little bit more normal and balanced?
Definitely. Yeah, actually, every time someone apologizes to me for crying in yoga class, I'm always like, I've cried in a yoga class too. So has everybody. All these people, we're all crying. Because it's true. When I've had personal things go wrong, wrong, not necessarily wrong, but, unexpected losses, a death, of someone close or something, I've often gone straight to yoga class. Usually I have the luxury of knowing many of the yoga teachers in my community. So usually I pick someone who I know won't care if I'm crying in the corner. And I go and I move my form in that way. And I think we all have challenging emotions. And actually, when I was first practicing yoga with like an actual teacher standing in front of me, who never let me leave poses early, I remember being like, maybe the point of yoga is to enter into a pose until you feel very angry and then just sit in your stewed up anger. Because I just remember getting into some pretty intense feeling poses, right? It doesn't have to be an intense looking pose to feel intense, but, you know, just hitting something and being like, oh my goodness, I'm not mad at anyone around me. I'm not mad, but for some reason, something got wedged in, you know, your upper back or somewhere, and you have this opportunity to let that leave, so that really it's a physiology, right? It's a chemical, and also it's an energy leaves, and you're no longer so, you know, clenched up around whatever it was.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's people in the chat saying, you know, this has been their go-to for mental, physical health, been doing it for 5 years, you know, and just seeing the benefits. I also have a really good friend who says that anytime he comes down with something or he's under the weather, yoga is one of the things that has gotten him out of like really serious illnesses where he even thought he was going to have to go to the hospital, and did yoga and fasted and drank tea and did yoga and repeat, and you know, came out of it. And I find it to be very healing also for, as a woman, you know, during when you're having your cycle. You know, sometimes the last thing in the world is you feel like rolling out your mat and like start moving around, but I always find that within like 5-10 minutes of doing it, your cramps are just alleviated. And I think that there's something, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, that happens when you're doing that, because you're literally just like tapping in.
Definitely. And I would second, I mean, obviously I do medical astrology for work, so I'm sort of like, yes, there's a physical benefit, but I definitely at one point had a pretty serious injury where I'd broken a vertebrae in my back and used yoga to heal it. Obviously not right away. I wasn't like, cool, back injury, let's pop into some back bends or something. But it was very instrumental. And I think it stopped me from having to have the surgery that many people have that causes some suffering in a longer term.
Yeah, because as we find out, and you hear a lot, you know, the more when you don't move, the worse it is. And so it's, you see these people who are in their 70s, 80s, you know, hiking mountains and stuff like that. It's because they just continued to move. There's other factors in it too, but they didn't stop. They just continued to flow with things, and they were physical, and whether it was just stretching or whatever. I just think that the importance of keeping going no matter what you're doing, whether it's a physical practice or it's literally a project you're working on, to not allow little hiccups to stop you. You have to just do the little bit that you even can, you know, because even 5 minutes is sometimes will just like open up these huge portals.
Yeah, and any folks out there who have constricted movement, so they're in a wheelchair or they're having an injury that they're working with, there are other forms of yoga that are non-physical in the same way, but still produce a physiological benefit and an energy body benefit, like mantra yoga, the chanting of the sacred words, mudra yoga, right, the creation of the gestures and the seals, different things you can do, meditation, of course. And so I really think in yoga, there's something for everyone, and it can meet you exactly where you are and take you many, many places that you might want to go.
Yeah, for sure. And someone is mentioning pranayama, which I find to be very beneficial. So would you mind talking a little bit about that and breathing techniques and stuff?
Sure. So pranayama is usually translated as breath control or control of the prana, the life force energy. It might also be in the Sanskrit pranayama, which would actually be the release and the freeing of the breath. And so when I teach pranayama, we did a wonderful like 50-hour course with a couple of friends of mine, teacher for the advanced teacher trainings a couple of years ago. And it was such a joy to talk about pranayama, because really prana is a distillation of solar energy. And when we're working with pranayama, it either increases solar energy or increases lunar energy. And so you have these different energy channels in your body. There's 3 main ones, 2 that make the snakes through the chakras, right? Equal opposites, and then 1 central channel called Sushumna Nadi. And so one of them relates to the moon, one of them relates to the sun. The central one is the convergence of the 2. And so when you're working with pranayama, you're actually really hacking your energy. And in yoga, we say that prana is one of the houses of the emotional mental state. It's one of the access points to help you change your mind and your emotions. It's also an access point to help you change your physiology and your body. And so pranayama is a very powerful practice. There are many practices. If someone was at home and they were like, I just want to start pranayama, the standard one you give people is the alternate nostril breath, nadi shodhana, right? Where you breathe in 1 nostril, usually with the right first, close the right, open the left, exhale, inhale left, close left, exhale right. There's additional layers to that, of course, but just starting with nadi shodhana would be a great thing to do. There's also the cessation of the breath, so holding, pausing the breath, and you can do that at the very top and the very bottom for just a moment during nadi shodhana, and you get some amazing results. One of the students I remember, I forget who, did nadi shodhana, I think for 20 minutes every day. And the results were really incredible. They're self-reported results. And so, yes, there are fancy ones that, you do upside down in your handstand or whatever. But if anyone was wanting to do it, that's the point to start.
Good. I love that. I love the 2 channels coming through, but then the balance in the center, and that you're basically like merging this together. That's I really love that, because I'm very much into right side, left side, masculine, feminine, sun, moon, the importance of it, noticing what side of the body things come up on, thinking about that, trying to work with it. And so these sorts of things are really beautiful, and it's like free. You can anyone can do it, just like you were saying. Even if you have some sort of physical restraint or whatever, there's things that you can do regardless of what your situation is. And I've found these breathing techniques to be so calming during times of even intense anxiety. Specifically the simple pranayama, with the nostrils that you demonstrated first off, which is what most people probably know, especially if you're doing like a home practice or what have you. That's what a lot of yogis, even online, will talk about or show in a class or whatever. But just the ability to be able to stop and slow down, to just focus on the breath, I think is one of the main things that like even calms the system down, is the focus and the slowing down. And that's what I found with yoga too, is just the intense focus that can happen, and that you actually, maybe you can speak on this too. I sometimes feel like I literally transcend to another place. And whether that is, I don't know exactly what it is. I know I stay here, and so to say, but to know like that you can get so focused, it almost feels like when I used to be a runner, the runner's high. And I feel like you can achieve that in yoga. And so in your personal experience, have you had any like really intense moments of that? Or do you have anything that stands out to you where you've just really like felt like, wow, I transcended into something else, and then coming back into your body, during corpse pose or something, where you're just like, wow, okay, I can really feel this now, or what have you?
Sure. Yeah. They say the spiritual path is like years of incredibly boring practice of extreme boredom, and then a brief shining moment of these like mountaintop glorious experiences of your own consciousness that change your life forever, and then back to the boring. same thing every day. So yeah, I definitely have had a few of the glimpses of the the things that keep people coming back for yoga. But I've also had, years and years and years of just sitting in my chair, silently reciting my mantra, right? Doing nothing. Those do pop up though. And in yoga texts, they'll go through the painstaking effort of applying very specific languaging to them. But I always encourage people when they have those moments to really take note of what occurred to them without the label first. So instead of being like, then I had a Kundalini rising, or then I had a spiritual awakening, or then I had a, fill in the blank with the applied label, to really notice what happened, how it felt, because then you're going to have, you might, slap a label on it and you'll be like, and that was the Kundalini force doing this, or that was, it's nice to have the labels, but first to really notice what's your own experience and have the openness away from the label, because it might show you something very powerful about yourself, your consciousness, what you are here to do, what's important to you in this life, what you might do that might be beneficial for yourself or others, right? Those are the important sort of things that pop out of that.
Yes, indeed. And I think the self-reflection is so crucial. And on all levels, whether you're doing yoga or not, but yoga has, opens a big space for self-reflection. And I think that there's really practical and responsible ways to use this art. I feel like I call it an art form. To me, yoga feels like an art form. I know it's like a physical, like exercise sort of thing, very, physically driven, but to me, it feels like an art, because I think that you can get to these spaces like you're talking about where you might have epiphanies of like figuring out like what it is you want to do with the rest of your life. And, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be a yoga instructor by any means, but it was like you tapped into something where you got clarity, you got a moment of clarity. And I think that kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, where there's like this pop version of spirituality, there's also that with any sort of thing in life. But you can find it in yoga as well, where it's like, okay, the tan, very toned person on the beach, very posed, looks like it's set up, there's like always that side of it too. And then there's people like you who are more interested in the spiritual aspect of this and like what it's actually doing. What are we really tapping into here? And I think that's why it's such a valuable thing that you're doing, because you're just taking, it's just a step further than what, many people are even here to do. And so I'm glad that you're doing it, because it's really cool. And I love to see it as well. I love too that you have on your Instagram, which I recommend people follow you on Instagram if they're not already, because you will share, segments of short videos of just like a practice for Pisces, or what is your personal practice for that lines up with your chart. So could you talk a little bit about that? Because there's always the overbranching, okay, we're in the sign of, right now we're in Leo, so there's moves that you could do for Leo, but how in your work do you align it for a person like specifically working with their chart? What would that look like if somebody was interested in doing something like that?
Right. Well, I'll always start by checking to see what type of yoga are they physically available for, time-wise, what are they available for? Do they prefer chanting? Do they prefer physical movement? Right. So I check with people first. So I don't want people to look and be like, well, if I can't do a giant back bend, I can't do Leo yoga or something. It's not that. And so first I do that. Then anytime I'm doing an AstroYoga practice for an individual, I read their entire chart, usually to them, so that they understand what we're working with. And through that really conversation where I'm asking them about particular things in their lives, I can see, just by looking at the chart, I can see where energy is likely to get stuck, where points of frustration likely are for them, as well as points of ease. And so usually I will plan a yoga practice for the ways that the energy gets stuck, or the ways in which they're likely dealing with frustration, or in the event that something has been pushed away, right? Sometimes we feel unmotivated because we've been unable to express anger, or we feel numb because we haven't been able to express emotion, right? These sorts of things. So I'll work with those placements. And everything in astrology has a physical and energy body correspondence. So we have correspondences with the chakras, with the nadis, with the koshas, which are layers of your energy body, and also with the physical systems of the body. And those do interact in really meaningful and like almost perfect ways, right? When you look at the zodiac, if you have a physical understanding of it, it will keep blowing your mind, I promise you, for many, many years. At first, you'll be like, oh, the zodiac goes in order from head to feet. Cool. And then you'll be like, oh, the systems that interact have very similar correspondences to the aspects in astrology, and whether those feel easeful or difficult. And so not to get, you can start just by knowing one placement and give it a try, right? You can start just by doing a pose for your sun sign. And if you can't read astrology, people who are listening, that's what I would start with. If you're like, I want to do this at home, but I can't read a chart, you can always come study with me. But if you're like, I just want a quick entryway into it, it'll be obvious. You'll be like, okay, Aries rules the head. I want to do something for Aries. I'm going to do something about placing the head well. I'm going to do vision stuff because Aries rules vision, right? I'm going to do, I don't know, a headstand or rabbit pose or something. So we have that. And so I will choose poses for the person based on the complicated configuration of their whole chart, a pose that will encompass multiple things. And usually for home practices, I just give people 6 or so practices, like 6 poses, because it's different than a studio class. When you're at home, you're not going to remember 30 poses done quickly. You'll remember to do your set held a little longer. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, that's good. I love tangents. I'm not afraid of a tangent. So, but you didn't. It's awesome because I want to make sure people understand that you're not just like picking a sign and then, okay, this. It's like you're working with the sign, but you're actually working with an individual and their chart and how you can correlate this together. And that's where I think like the real work will come in for a person, because you can align with your sign and do movements for, whatever that is. But I think when you get more specific, just like with anything, that's where the real magic starts to happen. So I think it's really awesome. And I love it. So I'm going to go over here because Jenny G is asking, she says, very curious, Emily's thoughts on the effects of Rahu's on the body in its new sign.
Great question.
That is a great question.
So,
thank you, Jenny.
So Rahu and Ketu, for people who aren't aware, they're the 2-headed dragon, or the head and the tail of the dragon, depending, but they're the 2 sides of the dragon. In Vedic astrology, we call them Rahu and Ketu. In Western astrology, North Node, South Node usually. And so those are your lunar nodes. And what they depict personally, right, is your personal dharmic pathway and your personal karmic inheritance. Karma just meaning past action, right? Well, it actually just means action, right? Good, bad, just stuff you already know and have experienced. And so as Rahu moves into a new sign, right, as we have this North Node changing signs, this is not so much about your personal, unless if it's coming back to the sign where yours is. This is more about collective energetic function and the directionality of it. And so when we have the North Node switching signs, you will see things collectively that highlight the themes in that continuum. Now, I just want to give a caveat, because if you start to look on the internet, for example, you will likely see examples of the negative aspects of that spectrum, just because humans have a negativity bias, and there's, the way the news likes to report things and whatever, they'll show you the bad news first. And the good news is happening too at the same time. And so right now, we're moving the North Node into the tropical sign of Aries. Aries rules the head. It's the first sign in the zodiac, and it rules the capacity that the individual has to express themselves. Now, this has just happened, so I wonder if people listening will have a full picture, but so maybe I'll go back 2 signs and just tell you what happened when Rahu was in those signs, so you can kind of understand what's about to happen. So for the last 18 months, we had the North Node in Taurus, and that was a time when you started to see financial news come into a big picture, right? Taurus rules finances. We also saw a lot about the environment coming forward, and people suddenly who were a lot more focused on some other news issues about 18 months before that shifted focus, and you started to see conversations in public arenas surrounding finance and surrounding the environment. Now everybody had an opinion, right? So you see this in many arenas. This, by the way, when it was in Taurus, this was a way for people, when the North Node was in Taurus, to address finance and the environment as a way to process their own deep-seated need for creativity and their own deep-seated need for spiritual enlightenment. And so you would have seen a lot of projection of like what you wish you could create in life upon people who were creating something. So there was a lot of criticism, for example, of people with high financial status, or there was a lot of criticism of different ways in which people were operational in the environment, right? And so there's sort of an energy of moving from one thing to another, and often with the lunar nodes, the projection of one into the other. I got on the internet a lot in the year 2020 to talk about astrology, because I noticed the North Node. Well, there was a huge cluster in Capricorn that was causing a bunch of ruckus, but there was also the North Node back then in the years late 2020 through 2021 in the sign of Gemini. And what we had in those years, I don't know if you noticed this, was the projection of Sagittarius, which is the ultimate truth, right? Having the highest philosophical truth that everyone should understand, right? Into the Gemini section, which is having an individual opinion. So you saw a lot of people in those days mistaking their opinion for the ultimate truth, or projecting their personal ultimate truth onto others. And so now when we go into Aries, we are going to have the movement toward self-expression and the people who really go for it. And even the people who have some degree of martial arts or sort of marital or capacity, right? There's this sort of physicality also in Aries. And so we have Libra, South Node. So this is the understanding of the karmic balance to the point that it can be hard to act, right? Because you're like, well, I don't want to say that because I might, who knows who it will affect, or, whatever. The sort of Libra energy in the South Node will be the energy of really caring about relationships, of having a deep interest in whether things are fair, and also having a deep interest in the sort of karmic balance of the world. Karma, by the way, not meaning like the spiritual boogeyman who's going to get you if you did something bad. Karma just meaning action. So everybody's acting all the time, even inaction is an action. And the sum total of all of those actions create our collective karma. And it's like, okay, well, we better get out there and do something good, because And so we're projecting our knowledge of karma in this point into the sign of Aries, into the sign of what the individual can do. And so we might start, it might be tempting in this time to blame others or to see the people who are acting. There's a great, is it Franklin Roosevelt or Teddy Roosevelt who quote, who it's like all credit to the man in the arena and none to the critic. Have you heard this?
I
It's
haven't, no.
It's a great quote. He's just talking about how it's very easy to sit on the sidelines at, say, a sporting event or watch the gladiator perform and be like, he didn't do so well. But it's much more, but like the glory should go to the person who's out there really trying and doing it. And so I think we're going to see that in these next 18 months collectively, both for the individual, we're going to learn to act, right? We're going to realize that we must act and that we must also be aware of the ways in which our actions are affecting others. And Aries, really in its purest form, is the pure spark of soul expressing through you. And so we have that. And then, on the lower vibration form of things, we might see a bit of criticism of the people out publicly acting as individuals. A lot of who do they think they are energy could pop up on the lower vibration of it, or blaming others for really what is a relational dynamic, right? That can happen too. But on the positive side, it's a time to free your own inner spirit and to let yourself get out there. Now it depends on your placements in Aries and Libra, and but it'll be different for individual charts.
Oh yeah, I love that. Thank you for the explanation. I like that you went back and kind of did like a little historic kind of, this is what was happening, because these things really make a difference. And I waver sometimes, and I can tell that you're probably in the same boat. I waver so many times with the way people talk about astrology, and they will blame something like everything's going wrong, so it must be that thing, or it's the Mercury retrograde or whatever. And it's not to say that these things don't affect stuff, but I think when you perpetually use it as an excuse for bad behavior or whatever, there's a very dangerous thin line that can happen. And I see that a lot more in like the pop culture Instagram version of a lot of this stuff. It's like there's more of a victim mentality in it. But I think when you have like more of a deeper understanding and being able to see like the positive and the negative and how you can use them in both like a productive way, I think is when these things click together really well. And so I like how the example of sitting on the sideline saying, whatever, okay. But then the energy, though, the universe is wanting those who are aligned with this to get out there, regardless of what these people are going to say, or the haters, whatever you want to say, because there's always going to be haters. And it's very easy for people who aren't doing the thing to criticize the person that's doing the thing, because the people not doing the thing don't realize what it takes to do the thing, if that makes sense.
Right. Any level of analysis of what other people are doing during this time would better be spent doing what you're going to be doing, whoever you are out there, whatever you may be desiring to do. And I love what you said about astrology. People blame astrology, right? It's really more like the weather. It's like the energetic weather in a certain sense, a powerful form of energetic weather. So if you wear your bikini outside in the winter, you don't blame the weather because you're cold, right? You're like, oh.
Right.
But a lot of us, metaphorically are doing that if we're not aware of astrology, because we don't know it's cold. Imagine you lived in a sealed off, bunker. You don't know if it's cold or hot outside. You don't know what the weather is. And so you just go outside and, it's more like being totally flabbergasted, put on the bikini, hope it's summer, then go find out it's actually a blizzard outside. Then you have to just accept it and go home and, put on your your wool parka or whatever you may have.
Yeah, no, that's a great way of saying it too, because I'm still just thinking about the balance of this aspect that we're moving into, of the people being called to talk about something or put themselves out there, and then the people that are going to be naysayers or whatever. That's very interesting, and I found that that is exactly um, how astrology works in its own way. Because, and I've said this before, but I've found, just by studying my own chart without much knowledge, with just looking things up or having a friend of mine telling me what to look for or having books or whatever, I came to this kind of conclusion of just like, wow, this is like a chart of choices. It's like you have this, okay, you have like the positive and the negative, or I can see in my chart how, yes, I have a tendency towards this, which might be more negative or whatever. So you literally have that moment where you have the choice. Are you going to lean into the fact that you have maybe a challenging aspect here, and just like kind of lean into it and not acknowledge that, wait a second, though, there's this flip side to it. And I think like that for me was like a total shift in the way I even looked at astrology in my own chart. And then knowing that every single person that walks around has this chart of choices, and kind of also validates again free will in a way, of that we have these choices that we can make, and you can do this, you can do that, the devil on the shoulder, the angel on the other shoulder, this age old kind of rule, you could say universal rule or whatever. And so I think that that's a beautiful thing. I love hearing that that's like what's happening here as we shift in these nodes.
Totally. And the bright side of the Libra South node is you could be incredibly supported in other people that you're in relationship with, right? And so it's not all, it's not, nothing's bad. Nothing's actually bad as far as an astrological transit. The news or whatever will highlight the bad because that's just the bias of those systems. But really a lot of good can come from this directionality into Aries, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I could see it for sure, because there's also like this, I don't know. I mean, a lot of times when you hear about Aries or whatever on a surface level, it's war, it's anger, it's this and that. But I always do look at it more of like, whoa, but there's like a huge force behind it for when you are wanting something to get done. There's a headstrong sort of thing where it's like full steam ahead. And I think that we're in a time now where action is rewarded. When you're doing what you're supposed to do and you're choosing to do the right thing, I feel like you're rewarded when you're doing that. And it kind of like goes along with the theme of that, in my opinion, anyway.
Right. Aries and Libra both rule action. Right? Libra rules the awareness of the reaction. Aries rules the initial action, right? And Aries in particular rules having a vision. So in a way, like it's the vision that the Libra energy reflects back to Aries. And so to have it actually literally rules your eyesight, right? But to have a metaphoric vision for your future, for your life, for you, what you want to create, what you want to express, right? This is what can happen with Aries.
Yes, I love that. That's so great. This is beautiful. I'm really enjoying getting this explanation of what's happening in the astro weather. I like that.
It's true. And just a reminder, like Aries is the innocent Lamb of God. I don't know if you've ever heard that, like the Lamb of God, but what it actually is, because it's the lamb, right? The ram, the lamb. And so what Aries represents, why that is considered to be innocence, is because each of us acts totally out of innocence. Now, there might be moments in your life where you're like, I probably shouldn't do that, and you still do it, but we're acting out of innocence. And in a sense, it's different than ignorance. I mean, it can encompass some ignorance sometimes, right? We make mistakes in each lifespan. But to understand Aries energy is to admit that the collective karma of the world has been produced entirely from innocent actions, which I think is a hard pill to swallow, because you start to go deep into like the human atrocities that have and are occurring, right, in history now, whatever, right? You're like, but what about, this and this and this? Nevertheless, the understanding from astrology is that the people, even those who enact really terrible violence or whatever, that beneath that, behind that, there's a spark of innocence, which is the consciousness spark. No matter how much it's been muddled and messed up in the actual action that comes out, that behind all of that is a spark of innocence. And that's what Aries represents. So if you can get in touch with that pure inner spark, which can't be tarnished, no matter how muddled you get in the expression, right? That's what'll tap you into what your actual vision for your life is, what your actual vision for humanity is, what you really want to express.
Yes, that's great. I love this. Oh man, and I had there was a pass by of a cat and my and Mario, so that's why I was like, had to acknowledge that. But yes, the inner child, the inner spark, because too, that's awesome. I think of just the excitement of a child, so that inner excitement, that inner knowing, the inner just the intuitive sense. So we all have these gifts and we all know them, I think, deep down. And just going back to that theme we were talking about earlier of like pushing it away, pushing it, you have this calling to do that thing. Doesn't feel like it's the right time, but everything is in due time, right? So it's just like, even if you felt like you were pushing something, unless you're causing harm, to yourself and other people, it's like, maybe the moment was to push it, maybe you had to wait 5 months to do that, to start writing that book, because in that 5 months you learned something else that you were like, oh, okay.
It's true. I mean, sometimes we do cause harm, right?
Yeah.
That's something to take note of. Like, you could make a decision that does cause harm, and we just have to acknowledge that. You might say, okay, I'm not doing this. And then from that experience, we often learn, oh, well, I don't want to do that again. The harm that cannot be caused is on the spiritual plane, right? Obviously, we can harm ourselves on the physical plane. We've all stubbed our toes. We know you can harm yourself. But there's a piece of you that will always remain unharmed, which is what we're trying to tap into. And of course, astrology can help you sort of avoid some of the pitfalls of regular, just fumbling around.
Yeah. And the fumbles are necessary. It's like, as much as they might suck or whatever, it's just part of the learning and growing here. And, speaking of writing a book, you recently released your own book. And so I wanted you to be able to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the book and the process of writing and what that was like. I always love asking authors just the process and how that happened, because there's, just like with anything, there's challenges, and some things may have went easier than you thought, and then others weren't as easy. So if you wanted to just talk a bit about your book and what that looked like for you writing it.
Sure, I'd love to. I actually have it here under my protractor.
Woo!
So I wrote this book. It's called AstroYoga for an Aquarian Age. You can see it's filled with things, and there's some I'm trying to land on a page with there's some graphs and examples, so you can see the planetary alignments with the hand there. But this book, it was really born out of, I teach a class called AstroYoga Teacher Training. It's a 50-hour course that yoga teachers and sometimes other practitioners take. It teaches you to read your chart. It teaches you to read others' charts, and it teaches you to apply yogic practice, including breath work, chakra work, asana work, maybe some other things. I forgetting exactly, but all of that into it. And I've taught that for several years. And it's actually, if anyone wants to take it, it's on demand at the International School of AstroYoga right now. But this book was born of that because everyone would ask for book recommendations. Not everyone, but many people would. And I would give them a list of about 50 books. And I would be like, read all of these and or, just options too. Like if you want to study this, do this. If you want to do this, do this. And so I made a book that housed all of that information so now I'll still give you the 50 book recommendations if you want them. But this way people have a way to just access it. It is for people regardless. So you could read it if you're a beginner. I had people read it who don't know any astrology or yoga. And then or I've also had professionals read it who can use it. So it's meant to do that. It's really a contemplation on the role that time and light consciousness plays in our lives. And of course, there's the section where you can like flip to your sign, learn about it. But I think it's, I think it's a good point if you are interested in Astro Yoga to start to begin to look at things. I think it's readable because I tried to make it readable. So I hope so yeah, I did spend many years helping to write public material for different things. So hopefully some of those things came in handy, and it was just a real joy. And I was surprised at how much of a community endeavor it kind of became. I just thought I'd write it and then the publisher would publish it. I was wrong. So, that's what I have to say.
Was it more of like on the end of just like editing or like a community involvement in what way, if you feel like divulging?
So my wonderful mother retired in recent years, and she is a fantastic editor. So I actually approached her and said, would you edit this book for me? Would you like serve as the editor? And she was much more thorough and robust than I had considered. But I also do, those like art and wine events. I do a collaboration with the man who runs the art and wine yoga studio where we do paintings about different zodiac placements in your chart. And I read people's charts while they paint. So he did the cover. And then the graphics, I had people who like lay out, like everybody was checking the layout at one point. And, there were just a lot of community events surrounding it. And so it sort of took a village. I thought writing a book would just be writing it, handing it off, and it was
right.
done. But it was more like a group endeavor. So.
Dude, I love that. That's a good insight because there's so many things in life that end up being like that it takes a village.
Yeah, and it was a really sweet experience to do it. Oh, and even, my friend in town is a National Geographic photographer. So she just popped over and took a picture of me one day in the middle of winter. I was like, I don't even have a photograph of myself. So anyway, it was a team effort.
That's really cool. And so I did put a link down to all your links are in the description, but a specific link on your website to the book. So people can order it through your website, but then where else is it available for people?
Let's see. It's on Amazon. It's through the publisher. You can request it from bookstores if they don't have it. Barnes and Noble. And perhaps other places
where most books are sold.
Definitely Amazon, definitely the publisher, which is Aurora Books. So definitely those two places, and then bookstores.
Nice. I like that you could, yeah, people should request it at their local bookstore because then it's like, oh, it's like a way to just get things in. So somebody that even works at the bookstore might be like, oh, didn't even know that this was a book.
Sure, call your local library.
Yes, do it.
True.
Nice.
True. Yeah, I often, if I need a book, well, I'll order them too, or you can request them from your local library. It's on Amazon. I think the ebook is out. It's also should be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Very nice. I love it. That's so great. Now, so before we start winding down, I do want to talk a little bit about Leo because we're in Leo season and Leo is very vibrant and radiant. We're also August 1st, which is Lammas for people who follow the wheel of the year. It's also the day of Lu. So there's all sorts of energy swirling today, and we have a full moon. So it's just very potent right now. It's always potent, but as we're talking, there's certain times where certain things ramp up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Leo and its correlation to yoga. And so Mario, who obviously, he remembered that he was on an interverse with you probably like last summer maybe, and he had posed the question of, have you ever heard of an astrological sign that correlates with yoga? And I'm not sure if you even remember, he said he couldn't remember what the actual conversation was. But since that time, he has kind of thought that Leo might be a correspondence to yoga. And if you have any insights on that, and specifically Nara Sima, I think that's how you pronounce the name of the god, is typically referred to as the god of yoga, which is associated with Leo. So we were wondering, as both of us were wondering, what you have to say about that, what you think about it, because then when I was writing up the questions for you, and I was just writing out the aspects of Leo, and then thinking about yoga, I'm like, wow, well, yeah, you have heat, you have the lion's breath, you have movement, you have these cat-like movements, cat stretches. There's snake stuff going on with it. The heart connection. So anyway, just wanted to pick your brain about that a little bit. And if there's anything that you think is very important for people to think about during this specific Leo season,
Sure. So I would argue that all of the zodiac signs are connected to yoga.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And if you had to pick, I would argue I would go for a fixed sign cross, because we have Taurus, which, well, of course, you talk to Mario, so the Hebrew alphabet and its associations with Taurus, and the tarot, right? So the Hierophant, related to the Hebrew letter, I think Vav, which corresponds to an understanding of nailing something, which is energetically the same as yoking, right? Yoking.
Okay, so yes.
Is the root of the word yoga. We are yoking the higher and the lower selves to one another. We are experiencing the higher selves in manifest embodiment, right? Now, another piece of yoga, arguably, is the open. So anyway, so I think they're all related, but
I love that. No, that's great. This is awesome. This is why we asked, because we knew that you were going to have some stuff. Yes, very special.
So Leo and Scorpio are both special signs because of something, and Virgo actually. So we have something really interesting that occurs in yogic practice. So you'll hear people talk about enlightenment a lot, right? To the point where you're like, that means nothing, because it's used as like a lot. We talk about it a lot, or consciousness, right? But there's something that happens, and forgive me for the Judeo-Christian reference. I guess I could do the yogic reference and talk about how Krishna was born of a virgin, right?
Okay.
Or how Christ was born of a virgin, right? But Christ is the Amrit of yoga, the soma value of the dripping nectar of consciousness, right? It's all a metaphor. And so we have this understanding that through the Virgo ruled section of the body, which is the intestine, the sun is born, which corresponds usually to a couple signs, but in particular to Leo. Okay. And so we have this understanding, okay, from the Virgo section, the Leo is born. Okay. So then we have the understanding of what happens physiologically. So Leo rules the heart. It's also connected to the third eye chakra. Okay. So what happens when you have the Kundalini rise? Well, the chakra opens, you have this experience of heightened enlightenment. And I want to say heightened enlightenment because it's not like someone's enlightened, they're enlightened, and they are done, right? Or you have an epiphany and then you're done. There are many stages of enlightenment. And so it's not like I won't pretend to be enlightened. And I suggest, unless if you really, really are, like, why bother? But most of us are on the road to enlightenment. So we're a little more enlightened than we were in the past. And so what happens is the Virgo ruled section of the body, the intestine, begins to draw in nutrients differently. And it's not that you're eating different food. Now, it might be sometimes people adjust their diets. That's personal preference and nutrition science, and, do your thing. But regardless of if you're eating, kale all day long or whatever, your wheatgrass smoothie, whatever you're eating, your intestine begins to take in nutrients differently, which slightly alters the makeup of the blood, right? And so this is why Virgo is a virgin holding the wheat, right? It's also around the time of harvest. And so your intestine adopts this, and it begins to translate into solar energy. Now, we already know that food is solar energy. Solar energy is related to Leo because obviously the sun grows food. And if you happen to eat like a steak, the cow ate food that was grown by the sun before it became the cow, right? So it all originates from the sun, what we eat. And so we have this understanding that this is transmuted from food back into the solar principle in the body, which is Leo. And so we have this correspondence of the Leo energy connecting to the heightened enlightenment, the opening of some of the consciousness centers, which correspond with glands in the brain, this sort of thing. And so Leo, I would say, like, sure, if you were going to take a pick of like a sign, if you could only have one sign related to yoga, you might choose Leo. I wouldn't just choose one sign though, because the zodiac is perfect in a way, but it's 12 pieces of a single whole. So yoga means union. And so when you're coming into the whole, you would want to be inclusive of the circle. Does this make sense?
Yeah, because it's more of a holistic way of looking at it instead of just trying to like pigeonhole it into something. No, I'm loving where this is going. This is awesome.
Totally. And for every story you have of someone having an amazing experience with one piece of the zodiac in their body, you'll find someone having it with somewhere else, right? So Pisces is a very spiritual sign, for example. It's related to the lymphatic movement of the body and to feet. You don't have to throw a stone too far to hop on the internet and find someone who's had a wonderful experience with walking barefoot, or someone who's had a wonderful experience with lymphatic drainage that's really revolutionized and changed their outlook and pieces of their consciousness, right? So that's just one example of, someone, right. You might go to that sign and say, and so much of yoga is glandular in nature. So a lot of postures are meant to move things that have less to do with, the muscular skeletal systems and more to do with the endocrine system, the lymphatic movement, fascia, right?
Yes, because too, just to that point, when I think about this, it's like a lot of times when you do yoga, if you're having digestive issues or you've been blocked up or whatever, many times you can do yoga and there's certain poses that will help promote digestion, so then someone might link it to that. Like if that's their experience, that yoga is usually helpful for them in the digestive regions, then they might then relate it, to, as you said, Virgo, because it rules the intestines and stuff.
Certainly. And, a good yoga question is, how do we digest our experiences of life? And so you don't have to go too far into Ayurveda, the yogic sister science of medicine, right, to see that most of the ways that they classify ailments have to do with an indigestion of either experience or substance or food, right? Something's come into the body that has not been assimilated or released.
Right. Great. This is awesome. I love that answer because that makes sense. It makes sense than just looking at, because I feel like, as you're saying, that was more of like a holistic view if you're looking at all of them. Because when I was writing the list, I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense. There's a heat and this and that. It's like, but there's not just that, like you were saying. There's all sorts of things that are connected to it. So I think that that's a really great explanation. And I think that there's room for you to speak on that a little bit even. I don't know if you go into that ever, like relating, like how does yoga and what astrological sign corresponds to yoga? It could even be something like that. And you go into that explanation because honestly, that makes so much more sense than just trying to like pick one sign and whatever. And that is more like a Western, even more like an allopathic sort of way of looking at it, of like, well, this is wrong, so you do that, and then whatever. But then you don't think about, well, if you do that, it's going to affect this part of your body. You're not thinking of it holistically. So I know that's a great explanation and a wonderful answer, I would say.
Sure. And, the things people might be, so there's a pathway of yoga called jnana yoga, right? The pathway of knowledge, right? You could argue that's related to what Sagittarius and philosophy, or Gemini and learn, right? So
Yep.
there's different, bhakti yoga, right? The yoga of devotion, maybe that's Libra or Taurus, or right. So you could pose contemplations, I think, on each.
Yep. I love that. Yeah, there's never usually one way of looking at many things. And it seems to me, after talking to you, that yoga is definitely one of those things, because you're bringing up types of yoga that I've never even heard of, didn't even know existed, because I'm just more of a home practitioner who does it for myself. I'm not, you know what I mean? It's not my area of study. So it's really awesome to just hear all of this stuff, because I've learned so much just hearing you talk about the different things. Because my first part, I always think of, like, a lot of people think of like hot yoga, or you think of hatha yoga, or you think about yin yoga is one of my favorites, And so, but I'm not as well versed in like all the different traditions and all of it. So it's been super great to just hear these things that that many people usually don't know, especially if they're not specializing in it. So.
Sure. Yeah. It can be, I think there's such a huge library of information and terminology, and it can be very, I think, confusing even when you first encounter it. So, hopefully I didn't scare people.
No. Yeah, I bet you didn't. Just like you said, if you're on the fence with either of these art forms, astrology or yoga, just jump in and don't be concerned about all these little nuances. That's how I always describe herbalism to people too, because a lot of times when I start talking to people, they're like, I want to know more, but I don't know where to start. And there's so many plants. How am I going to ever know them? And then they get so overwhelmed that they don't start. And it's like, well, no, don't worry about that. Like, you can't allow yourself to think that way, because then you'll never start, because you're never going to know it all. And that's just like how so many things in life go. And I think that every practice has that sort of moment where you get intimidated by just thinking about how much is going on there, that you might just be like, oh gosh, okay, I'm good. Can't do it.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, even if I'm doing complicated astrology work on your chart, like, you can look and say, you know what, I know I have a Jupiter in Aries and I want to highlight that. So I'm going to do something for Aries energy. Like, it can be simple. And often I think for personal practice, simple is better. So, you don't have to, I don't think people need to be fearful of of trying or exploring something new.
Yep, I would agree with you 100%. Well, we kind of rolling towards the hour and a half mark. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, because as I just said, I have learned a lot, and it was a really great conversation just to pick your brain a little bit more, learn more about you and all the things that you do. And I really want to give you an opportunity to have the floor to shout out whatever you'd like to shout out, let people know where they can find you. And also, yeah, you and I were both Pacific Northwest, in the Pacific Northwest area, so we're already kind of seeing overlap too with certain things. So it's really cool. And yeah, let people know where they can find you, and if they want to get a hold of you to sign up for classes or memberships and all the good stuff you offer.
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on. It's really been a joy to have this conversation with you, and just a pleasure in general to make your acquaintance these last 2 times, and I'm thrilled. And yeah, we're practically neighbors, so that's pretty cool. And as far as finding me on the internet, I am at Emily Ridout AstroYoga on Instagram. So I'm on there. I'm on YouTube. I post weekly forecasts. I have an email list that sends out weekly forecasts. So that's a really great way. And if you sign up for that, you get a free copy of AstroYoga for your sun sign, which is just a quick ebook guide for those of you who want to get started, just real snappy. And what I'm excited about work-wise right now is we are launching the International School of AstroYoga. So we have collaborative programming that's about to launch on there, and my personal memberships. So I do something called Luminary membership, which is like a stellar deal, and then like Quintessence membership, which is a little higher, but you get a full 1-hour session each month with me. Those are moving over to be on the new platform. And it's kind of cool because there's going to be like a community space. So you can, if you're a person who likes to talk to people or get group understanding, you can do that there. And we just moved over there actually today. So yeah, so it's kind of cool. It's really cool. And I'm going to be sending out to my email list a special offer because the pricing changed slightly over there. The current members are grandfathered in, but I'm going to send out, if people want to join at the old prices, they still can for a while. So I'll be sending that out on my email list soon. And it's pretty exciting. Be on the lookout for cool trainings if you happen to be a person who wants to learn astrology and yoga. Not you, but if one listening would like to learn it. So I'll be around. As always, there's lots of free resources on my sites. And yeah, I just love this stuff. So if anyone ever wants a reading or a AstroYoga session, those are on my site too.
Awesome. Yes, I can tell you love it. I can tell that you have a knack for it and you are working in your purpose. I really can feel that. And it's come across not just in this interview, but as I said earlier, in the multiple times I've heard you speak and the way you present and everything else, it's very strong. And so thank you for doing what you're doing and following that spark that you have inside, because it really is doing a lot of good work. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. We'll have a really great rest of your night, Emily, and we'll talk again at some other point.
Perfect. Bye.
Bye. Alrighty, everybody. Well, that was a really lovely one. I really love Emily's energy, and it's been really nice, as she said as well, just to get to know her over the last handful. You know, I've gotten to get to know her because being on Interverse, doing the Astro Herbs with her last time. So it's been really awesome. And there's been some crossover that we're learning outside of even just Interverse and stuff, being in the same area of her running into a friend of ours who took one of her courses and all this stuff. And that was while we were aligning up this interview. So the universe wanted us to come together, and tonight we did. And I'm really happy you guys were here with us too, because that was really lovely. And there's always so much to learn. And I love talking to people that are just like digging into that thing that they love, because they end up bringing up all of these things that they can just shower us with all these little nuggets that we wouldn't have known otherwise. That's why I love hearing what nodes we're moving into and what is fueling that, because I definitely feel that energy of, if you feel called to be putting out information, put it out there. We are in like the age of information. You know, it can be overwhelming with how much information that there is around. But I think that if you're called to do it, and to not allow the naysayers to stop you. And trust me, I have to remind myself about that kind of stuff all the time, because my own insecurities can bubble up, and it happens to the best of us. And you have to remember that if you are driven to do something, you should do it and be determined. And if you're not hurting or harming other people, and you feel that it's in your heart to be sharing, then by gosh, share it. And don't worry about the people that are calling you out on the sidelines, telling you this, that, and the other thing. But always be open to criticism that's constructive, and always be open to learning more things. And I think that that's the difference. That's like the transmutation that would happen if you were to be having somebody coming at you and saying something and being like, okay, well, you're bringing this to my attention for a reason, so I'll work on that, but you're out of line on this. So anyway, just wanted to say that sort of stuff for anybody out there who's on the fence, just like we were talking about. If you're on the fence about trying yoga, trying astrology, trying whatever it is, maybe just give it a try, because you never know until you step over the fence, and then you might not like it. And if you don't like it, then you can step back over on the other side. So up on the screen, we've got a big thank you to all the patrons. As always, thank you so much, everybody. You guys continue to just really bring joy to my life and support that is much needed, and is helping me to continue on doing what my inner spark is telling me to do, which is be here with you guys on Tuesdays, hang out on Thursdays with Mario, and continue to make herbal medicine and all the goodies that I do in my kitchen for all of you guys. So thank you to Chance, Binna, Sarah G, Liam, Amy, Miri and Hank, Jenny G, Erica, Moonlander, Spoons, Mary, Catherine, Logan, Lily, Debbie, Natasha, Mary Beth, Nausicaa, sorry, I always stutter on that name, Stephanie, and Jennifer. Thank you so much. And Jennifer just signed up as a patron today. So thank you, Jennifer Nyberg. I really appreciate that. It was really nice to see that come through. Patreon.com/thehealinghome for anyone who wants to follow suit with all these other people. And I actually, admittedly, I put the full moon offering out to my patrons before I sent the newsletter out to everyone else, but I did it today, and I typically do it the day before. But I just want to assure you guys that you guys still got it first before everyone else on my newsletter list got it. And that's one of the benefits of being a patron, is that you get a chance. There's a window there where you can order things before everybody else gets their hands on it, which can be good, because sometimes my batches are really, really small, which is the case for this one this week. So that little leg up with a Patreon membership could help you get something that you may have not gotten in the case. But I felt like I wanted to clear the air on that one. I wanted to just be honest about, like, oh man, I went into Patreon today and I was like, I was supposed to send this out last night, and but anyway, I did it before technically, but that's where I had to kind of come clean on. So next week's show is the Rune Woman, Miss Ingrid Kincaid. This is going to be a great episode. Now, Mario and I are actually tag teaming this episode with Ingrid, because we both have a relationship with Ingrid. I've taken a class with Ingrid before. We've known Ingrid for a handful of years because she's in our social circle in a sense. She's really close with our friend Christy Williams, who I interviewed a few months ago. She also owns a shop called Invoke. And that is actually how we first came across Ingrid, was at Christy's shop, because Ingrid was doing a book signing. And I had a room reading with Ingrid. And I was like, you know what? I see myself in this woman. I remember walking away from the interview and saying to, the rune reading, and saying to Mario, and he agreed. I said, oh my God, I seriously, when I was sitting across from her, felt like I was sitting across from myself as an old woman. And it was very interesting. And he goes, oh my God, I could totally see that. So anyway, next week, me and Mario and Ingrid are going to talk Northern symbolism. We're going to talk the runes. We're going to talk about Ingrid's experience with the runes, her ancestral connections to the runes, and how she likes to work with them, how she likes to teach them, and what comes through. And so she has a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm really excited to have her on the Healing Home with Mario, because Mario, as you all know, if you guys know, Mario is definitely into Northern symbolism, and his studies of it continue to grow and progress. And so Ingrid has a lot of knowledge and opinions about that as well, that line up very well with where Mario is at and where I'm at. So here we'll be on the 8th, 8/8/23, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on YouTube with Ingrid Kincaid. And the Full Moon Offering newsletter, the next issue, will be coming out on the 30th. And so for those who haven't noticed, we have 2 full moons in August, which means this full moon on the 30th is a blue moon. And yeah, so that's exciting. So there'll be 2 offerings this month. But for this month's offering, which came out today, I have fresh garden mugwort for you guys. So the mugwort that I have for you was grown in my garden. It was planted by me. It was raised up by me. It was fertilized by me, loved by me, talked to by me, and made into beautiful medicine by me. And the mugwort is quite potent and powerful. Very excited. This is the tail end of one of the batches I have. So I only have 4 available. I know that's a really small offering, but there's only 4 1-ounce tinctures, but I also have 2 available of my Dream Team mugwort set, which comes with a 1/2 ounce bottle of mugwort tincture and a 1/2 ounce bottle of mugwort anointing oil, which is pretty exceptional and has many uses. One of them, obviously the dream aspect, but the anointing oil, really wonderful for pain, specifically menstrual cramps. I use it myself on menstrual cramping, but I have a friend of mine who gets really, really bad cramps. And she said she applied the oil and she said she couldn't believe it. Within 5 minutes, her cramps were like totally relieved. And that is the power of mighty mugwort, the crone wort. So Fresh Garden Mugwort Tincture is $18 for 1 ounce. This is special. Like I said, very small batch. So get your hands on that, because once this batch is gone, I do have another one in the queue that is macerating right now, but it won't be done for probably another couple months. So once I sell out of this mugwort, I won't have any in stock for a few months. So you can get your hands on it now by emailing me if you'd like, michelleshealinghome@gmail.com. As always, michelleshealinghome.com for anything else. If you want to go through the website, read the blog, sign up for the newsletter, schedule a consultation, all those good things. Call or text me on my Google Voice number, which is 503-568-1569. Shout out to Sarah G. She actually gave me a call and it was awesome. So I got to talk with Sarah G, voice to voice, which is always nice. So feel free and leave me a voicemail on that number as well. And I'll get back to you and we can chat it up if you're wanting to place an order. If you want to do it that way, that's wonderful. So last Thursday, every Thursday coming up, we took a week off because Mario was talking in the periodic table with Dr. Narco Longo on Old World, Florida, but we're back this week for another episode. We haven't quite decided what we're going to focus on. We have an idea. It might change and shift, but we're going to still be in the summer of love, baby. So you bet your bums that we'll be talking 1960s something going on in that wacky time. So that'll be this Thursday at 6 p.m. Symbolicstudies.com for anyone who wants to catch up with Mario. He's been really excited because he's getting quite a few people ordering things through the website, which is new because before he was on Etsy and then he was doing like emails and texts for tarot readings and stuff. But now if you want to schedule a tarot reading or a study session with him, order a print, if you want to get his elemental study packet, If you want to contact him for design work, you can do it all through the website, which is really cool. It's streamlining everything, and he's really excited about it. So check him out there, and also check him out on YouTube and Instagram. He's also on TikTok if you're looking for that stuff, at Symbolic Studies. I think it's at symbolics.studies on Instagram. Just a heads up on that. And with that, I think that'll do it. Thank you guys again, as always, for hanging out with me. Fun as always learning something, always growing. Hope you guys are feeling the same way. Enjoy Lamas, Yamas, however you want to pronounce it. We are moving into the later time of summer, which is sometimes we're past the dog days of summer technically, but we're getting into that time where the heat kind of sometimes cranks up depending on where you're going. You're starting to harvest more things. The garden, some plants are kind of like coming down to their wilting stages, heading back to the earth, So it's a cool time. There's a lot of transition, but I always love the symbolism of the corn dollies or the wheat dollies that are made at this time, kind of like symbolizing abundance of sorts. I also always think about the golden color of the wheat, even though that comes closer, to like the Virgo stuff. But this time things are starting to turn golden. Like sometimes the lawns are turning yellow. They're getting crispy, things are drying out. So I think that there's like some sort of correlation there with that golden energy, and also that comes through with Leo. Speaking of Leo, next week, Wednesday, we have another Astro Herbs series on Innerverse. So we'll be joined with Mario, myself, Kyle of Tippy Canoe, and Gabe. I'm pretty sure Gabe's going to be back for this one. So anyone who's been tuning in and noticing that Gabe took a little hiatus, pretty sure he's back for this one because he, in fact, is a Leo. So I knew he would miss that. And I know Chance has a special connection with Leo as well. So I hope to see you guys all there. I hope to see you next week with Ingrid and Mario. And on Thursday, if you can't make it, no worries. But Mario and I will be there speaking about the 60s and all the craziness. So until the next time, guys, enjoy your evening and take care. Thank you.